Yesterday, we started 11.1. We talked about what it means to be a statistical question. Okay. Statistical question is gathering multiple pieces of data. You can summarize it, organize it. Okay, then we talked about, I believe, statistical variables was next. And we talked about statistical variables. There were two types. And that's what we were just doing here at the end, which was the categorical or quantitative. Categorical, it's putting the data into category. Quantitative uses numerical values. And we're ready to talk about the difference between population and samples now. As we talk about population and samples, population and samples, I feel like you've probably seen these words.
Oh, man.
Okay. As we talk about these words, populations and samples, I'll look at this here in a moment. Okay, probably words that you have heard in other math classes, I would think. But population is the set of all members of a group that you want to know something about. So that is your bigger group. Okay, whereas a sample is the subset of the population that's being studied to answer a statistical question about the population. So we talk about taking a sample, that's taking a portion of a bigger group. So like if we talk about the population being Tri-Central High School, then a sample could be, okay, polling the junior class, okay, or it could be polling Mrs. Sargent's first hour class, or whatever the case might be, okay? So population versus sample. We're going to do just a little bit of, okay, what's what, figuring out these words as we go through these examples. So, example A. A school newspaper randomly selects 30 students from each grade level to participate in a survey to determine the opinions of students at the school. What is the relationship between the sophomores surveyed, all the students surveyed, and all the students at the school?
The sophomores are a sample.
Okay. The sophomores could be a sample. What would be the overall population here? Okay, so when we talk about all the students at the school, right there we're talking about our population. Now, if the population is all the students at the school, okay, it was mentioned that the sophomores, talks about sophomore survey. Those could be a sample, yes. What about all the students surveyed?
Like all of each class.
Well, it just says all the students surveyed. What would those be considered? That's part of it. That could be a sample as well, right? Okay, so those are all either samples or parts of samples. When we talk about the sophomores surveyed, all the students surveyed, the key word is the groups that are actually surveyed are your samples. Okay, whether random or not, we're not talking about right now, but those are your different samples. So population is all the students at the high school or at the school. Sample could be sophomore survey, and just in general, all students surveyed. Okay. So, a little bit of vocabulary there. Population and samples. Okay. Start reading B. B is a polling organization randomly chose eligible voters in the state of Indiana to ask who they would vote for in an upcoming election for governor to determine who will win the election. A, what is the sample in this scenario? And B, what is the population? I don't necessarily know that's the order I put them in. Kind of up to you guys what order we talk about this.
Population of all eligible voters.
Okay. If we're talking about they randomly chose eligible voters in the state of Indiana, so our population is going to be all eligible voters. If I want to be specific, in Indiana, right? So that's going to be our population. What about the sample? The random voters chosen, right? It's not a specific group or anything like that, but it's whoever randomly was chosen. So sample, I'm going to say the voters randomly chosen. Is it a survey or no? Just to answer the question, I guess. Voters randomly chosen to answer the question. And then population, all eligible voters in Indiana. Okay. Get written down what you need there. And then start reading C, example C. I'll go to there what it looks like. Might be ready. So C, a city worker collects 5 vials of water from each of 10 randomly selected locations all over the city to test the levels of bacteria in the city water supply. Okay, and then the questions are, what is the sample in this experiment? And what is the population? Okay, so city worker collects 5 vials of water from each of 10 randomly selected locations all over the city to test the levels of bacteria in the city water supply. Population and sample.
Population being all of the city.
Okay, so we're here trying to determine the bacteria in the city water supply. Population being the whole big group, so the city's water supply. I can go ahead and fill that in. So if the population is the city's entire water supply,
the sample is the vials of water.
okay, the vials of water collected. Okay. How many vials is that collected?
5.
5 vials from 10 locations. So there's 50 vials collected there. Okay. Ultimately, it comes down to the random vials collected, right? Specifically, if you look at this one, there were 5 vials from 10 random locations. So 5 times 10 is the 50 random vials of water collected. So 50 vials of water collected. Okay. And D when we're ready. Suppose Hannah wants to find out the most commonly driven type of vehicle among the students at her high school. Since 1,560 students attend her high school, she asks every 10th student who enters the building one morning what kind of vehicle he or she drives. Again, sample and population.
Population would be 1,560 students that attend.
Okay. Whole big group, basically her high school. They gave us a specific number in this case, right? The 1,560 students that attend her high school. What about the sample?
156 students, she asked.
Okay. We want to get specifics, the 156 students, because she asked every 10th student, right? Okay. So what's the sample? Every 10th student that is asked. So 156 students. And it's not that you always have to put the exact amount, just making you guys think here. And then population is the 1,560 students at the high school. Okay. A little bit of difference between population and sample there. Okay, population, the whole big group. Sample, we're taking a portion of it. It's the smaller group. Okay, it's some smaller subset that we're looking at. Bless you. Okay. We have one other set of vocabulary words here. Okay. And these vocabulary words here, we start talking about what it means to be parameters and statistics. Okay. So if you flip to the back side, you'll notice here it talks about a parameter. A parameter is a piece of information about a variable that is based on the entire population or a group of people or things as being studied. So parameter is something that describes the population, whereas a statistic is a piece of information about a variable that's based on a sample or subgroup chose from the population. So you've got parameter, that is some piece of information that describes the entire population. Statistic is some piece of information that describes the subset or that sample. Okay? Now, I personally have my easy way to remember those of the P's go together, the S's go together. I'm sure you'll come up with yours. So, as we look at these, we're being asked, is each quantity a parameter or a statistic? So basically, does each set of information we're given, would it be describing the entire population, or would it be describing a subset of the population? Okay, so let's look at A. A high school has 3 lunch periods. In a randomly selected lunch period, 24% of the students brought lunch from home. What is this piece of information describing?
Statistics.
Okay. Is it describing the sample? Okay. High school has 3 lunch periods. So when we're talking about the whole population, we're talking about all 3 lunch periods, right? In a randomly selected lunch period, 24% of the students brought lunch from home. So we're specifically talking about that one lunch period. Okay, and the fact that 24% of them brought lunch from home. So it is a statistic. Officially, it doesn't say to explain, but again, these are your notes. And so if you want to put something, I have down that 24% describes a sample, okay, or a sample of the lunch population. you haven't already, of course, start reading and thinking about the next one. At the end of its first year of business, a movie theater collected data on how well its concession stand operated that year. The theater used its total yearly concession sales and number of tickets sold to calculate the mean amount spent at concessions by a moviegoer was $8.14. Parameter or statistic? Parameter? Why?
Because they're used to, they're not
Total yearly concession rate.
whole year, nothing was just month or anything. It's
Okay.
It says total year.
End of its first year of business, so it's only been in business 1 year. They collected data on how well it did. The theater used its total yearly concession sales. They've only been open a year, so the number of tickets sold to calculate the mean amount spent at the concession stand was $8.14. So I agree. Parameter. So we talk about parameter. What do I have written down? The 814 is based on concessions of all moviegoers. Okay. Again, write down description or don't, but it's a parameter. C. 53.2% of a district's eligible voters voted for the sitting U.S. House of Representatives.
the whole nation, it's just one district. So, I mean, it can also be parameter because it doesn't say.
Parameter. Nice statistic. Parameter. But the last one was statistic. So I think statistic.
We also have 5 total examples here. Okay. All of you guys that base it just based on, oh, well, she's giving us this and this, so it's got to be this.
All right,
But-
I'll give you a reason. It's all got a reason.
It's
all eligible
that's-
voters in this.
In the district. The district, not everyone.
Well, and I think what the clarification should probably be is it says voted for the sitting U.S. House Representative. If this is just the sitting U.S. House Representative for that district, which I think that's the key here, is it says for the sitting U.S. House Representative. It's just mentioning one. So I would go for that. I have parameter written down on mine.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Again, based on all eligible voters. Okay. The House Representative would just be specific to that district. So. So parameters. Based on all eligible voters. Okay. The median age of a car in 20 randomly selected spaces in the school parking lot is 7 years. Why?
Randomly selected.
Okay. So, statistic, because it's just based on those 20 randomly selected spaces. Did they check every space? No. So, statistic. Based on randomly selected spaces. Now, without reading the next question, those of you that like to say, oh, well, she's giving us one of this, and so now it's got to be this, you've had 2 of each.
It's statistics.
It's randomly selected.
It's statistic.
Because you've read the problem,
Yes.
or because you're just guessing what Mrs. Sargent would put up there.
That's what I
Okay. So,
40 random.
40 randomly selected members of a high school music program were asked to report the number of hours they spend practicing each week. If you were to compute the mean number of hours, would you answer be a parameter or a statistic?
It's 40 randomly selected.
Okay. It came from 40 randomly selected members. Did they ask the entire music program? No, they did not. So it is a statistic. Based on 40 randomly selected members. Okay, guys. As I suggested, I thought you would. You have some work time. 11.1 is showing in Savas, or it should be. So get in there and get working on it.